You ready? Okay. All right, well, thanks for coming today. So obviously we're making some announcements today. I'm standing here with our coroner, Vicki DeGeus, and of course our Deputy Chief Criminal Prosecutor, Topmiller. Geez, sorry. Sorry. So we called this press conference to go over a little bit of information. As you all know, we've been waiting for some information to come back from forensic processing of evidence. That information has come back to our office, and based on that, my office has met with the prosecuting attorney to discuss the filing of charges for first-degree murder against Mr. Bullinger, who is obviously the suspect in this case. And so this information that I'm speaking of today is very much in parallel to the coroner's information, which I will let her speak on. As you know, the other victims had not been identified, but at this time I will turn that over to the coroner and let her speak about the identification of those two remaining victims.
Thank you. We received last night the information. I actually received it this morning, but through the investigation and DNA, we have positively identified the victims as Nadia Medley and her daughter Peyton Medley of Ogden, Utah.
Can you talk about the cause of death at all?
I cannot at this point. We're still in the investigative phase on that.
And obviously there's information that you all have up to this point regarding that the individuals did die of gunshot wound. I think that's probably pertaining to your question.
A single gunshot wound each, correct?
That's correct. And so, but again, because of the condition of the bodies and the length of time before they were found, obviously the coroner office and our crime lab were able to put some information together, but we really appreciate the fact that the coroner has been able to come up with the identification of the two based on the evidence processing by the Idaho State Forensic Lab.
How was the DNA evidence, what DNA evidence was used in this case? Was it dental records or what?
Dental records were used for Gerald Baker. In this instance, we had to use known DNA or samples from known items of theirs, plus bone marrow.
Has there been any further estimation on the time of death? Have you been able to narrow it down at all?
We haven't narrowed it down to any closer than we have. We're still working on that.
Sheriff, are you closer to, one, understanding the motive, and two, finding Bullinger?
Really no closer on either one. I mean, obviously only Mr. Bullinger knows the true motive of this crime, this heinous crime. We continue to work leads literally every day. Tips, if you will, come into our office and our collaborative agencies in basically a tri-state area at the bare minimum. Those agencies, and we continue to run that information down. Unfortunately, at this point, we do not know where Mr. Bullinger is. We do not have a suspected location on Mr. Bullinger. But what we would implore is that if there's someone out there seeing this conference today, if they know of the whereabouts of Mr. Bullinger or have an idea, we would implore them to come forward with that information. So not just that we can put the conclusion to this case and hold Mr. Bullinger accountable for what we believe alleged to have committed these crimes, but also for the closure for the families of the victims of these crimes.
How do you believe that he was able to give law enforcement the slip so easily?
Well, as you know, obviously based on the condition of the bodies, he had a several-day head start on all of us. We were unaware outside of a welfare check when the bodies were discovered, but there had been such a length of time that the bodies were badly decomposed. Obviously, that tells us there was a significant amount of time between when the event happened, when the murders happened, and the time when we were brought into the case. It's unfortunate that it turned out that way, but that is the facts.
He is no longer a person of interest. He is a suspect charged with 3 first-degree murders.
Well, he has not been charged yet. Today, and Mr. Topmiller could speak to that if he'd like, we have submitted to the prosecutor our case for review. And would you like to speak to that, Mr. Topmiller?
So Mr. Bullinger is going to be charged today, definitely by the end of the day, with 3 counts first-degree murder. He also still has the pending charge for failing to report a death. So that's 4 separate charges. The first-degree murder carries no bond until at least until he sees a judge, carries that automatically. So that's what we're going to do.
What kind of changed from the point where he first was failure to report a death, and now he's being charged with first-degree murder? Was there new evidence that came about during this? I guess what changed with the point with
Well, like the sheriff said, the sheriff's office has been diligently tracking down leads. Some of those leads produced evidence. I'm not going to speak as to what it was, but we feel it's a strong case now.
What's the frustration level here on, you say you don't know where he is. Has there been any credible sightings that you can mention, or is he just totally gone to ground in the wind?
There's been alleged sightings, as you know, in at least 2 different states. And unfortunately, with a tremendous amount of efforts by not just law enforcement agencies, but volunteers and people in society, unfortunately, those sightings have not come to fruition, if you will. Again, they are alleged. There certainly has been photographs out to the media, to the public, but not photographs of Mr. Bullinger post-event. Those were photographs that some people have had and were able to bring forward, but unfortunately no one has, to the best of my knowledge, no one has actually seen him, or we have a credible sighting where we know he's in this location at this given time.
So, Sheriff, what's next?
You know, again, I can say that, you know, the families have been notified in this case by the coroner this morning in my office. So those notifications have been made. That's very, very important for those families, of course. And then, and they have their own process they have to go through now. For us, it's a continuation working with the prosecuting attorney's office. These charges will be filed today. We'll have warrants in hand, if you will. And that just, we're going to be putting that out, that we now have warrants for murder on Mr. Bullinger. We're hopeful that the next week or so, the next few days, the next week, something will come from this new information and these new charges, that people will bring information forward that is hopefully verifiable, and we can get a more of a strong case as to where Mr. Bullinger is, and we're just going to keep working it. That's all we can do. We're going to keep taking the information that comes in. Our case is very strong, as Mr. Topmiller said, and it's a good case. It's been worked on by a lot of people, and we are hopeful that the information on his whereabouts will come to us, and until that happens, we're just going to keep looking for him.
Is there anything?
Sheriff, I guess a two-part question. Do we know, have you guys been able to piece together how Bullinger knew these two, the Medleys? And then, latter part of that question, how did the Medleys know the first victim of the Gerald Michael?
Well, your first question, did Mr. Bullinger know these people? He definitely knew these people, and they definitely had some type of relationship. Whether the victims all knew each other, it's speculative at this point. We can't say. There's a lot of parts of our investigation that we can't and won't talk about, because we will be protecting the integrity of our case. In the event that we do find Mr. Bullinger, we want to move forward immediately. So certainly there's a relationship. The common denominator is Mr. Bullinger, and the other common denominator is the fact that all 3 of these victims were found in one place.
Do you have any more, I guess, concrete timeline? I know just kind of from what we've been able to gather was that some friends last heard of on the 8th, and then wife on the 12th. Do you have any concrete, more of a timeline or anything?
Not really. I think you're right on it, Dean. I mean, obviously the information when we discovered the bodies, and then the potential information that he was in our area, then over in the Utah area. Obviously his car was found in Wyoming, but you're talking about 3 weeks roughly when that information comes to us, that when someone identifies that to be the car we were looking for. Again, that's a very long time. 3 weeks in a case like this, that's a big jump on law enforcement.
Did you get a lot of information, a lot of clues from the discovery of his vehicle?
We gathered information, physical evidence and forensic evidence from that vehicle, which is critical to the case. We can't discuss that, but we are very happy to get that car, and the information and evidence we found in that car was brought back here to Canyon County.
Is there any indication that he may have taken his own life, obviously, with that car being found in such a heavily wooded area?
No indication to us at this point.
If the public does see him, obviously, You want them to contact, not necessarily approach him? And so
Right,
forth?
that's an excellent point. We still consider him armed and dangerous without question. In our opinion, he has shown a propensity to commit violence. Immediately call local law enforcement, and that information will get to us, but the call needs to go to their immediate law enforcement who can take the swiftest action in the most safe manner possible. Okay.
He's known to be a pilot. Is there any indication that he could have possibly flown somewhere and gone somewhere?
No indication to us at this time, but your questions, the possibilities are endless, right? So we look at this case as anything is possible, and our net is very broad. And so working with both our state and local and federal partners in law enforcement to determine those facts as the information comes to us.
Does anything change now that he's being officially charged as far as how the net goes out with other law enforcement agencies?
Not really. These people in law enforcement, as well as you, know that he's been a person of interest, certainly, for the reasons he is. Now we've made that more official in terms of the information that's come to us and the prosecutor being able to file for those charges. I think it will give a heightened sense of awareness to law enforcement throughout the nation. This is still a nationwide warrant and not an extraditable throughout the nation, zero bond. And as far as the public's concerned, I want them to pay attention to that as well. This is a man who is armed and dangerous in our estimation.
Why was it, just an aside, Vicki, why did it take longer or a long time, if that's fair to say, to identify, to make a positive ID on the two other women, either the bone marrow and other tissues?
Because we had to find known samples that were known to them, and then be able to attach that known information to the samples that we had.
You had to find something to match it to, essentially.
Exactly.
I guess I just want to clarify as well. I know Vicki had mentioned as a cause of death is still under investigation, but then there's talk about a single gunshot wound. So
Yes. Again, I think you have most of that information already. A single gunshot wound to each individual, and so you basically can do the math on that, right? A firearm was used in this crime, right? So that's a violent crime. There's intent, in our opinion, and again, obviously, this is an alleged suspect, but on an alleged crime. But we feel very strongly about our case. And based on the evidence, and I will just note too, again, the coroner has had to be very patient. Her job is to identify and make notification of these individuals. It's been very difficult for her office and for ours with the phone calls by the families and of course the press, and because everyone's interested, but because of the ability of forensic science and the forensic lab here in the state of Idaho, we're able to, and of course the dental records with our office and with Vicki. It's amazing to be able to bring all those resources to bear and then ultimately identify all these individuals. And again, that helps bring such closure to those families. Those family members aren't coming back, and they knew that. But now we can put the names, as the coroner has done today, and that's very commendable. And we really appreciate what the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab has done for us in this case.
Vicki, how did you get something to match it to?
There was evidence found during the detective's investigation that was known to be strictly to those people, and through that we were able to obtain DNA off of those items and then submit it to the state lab.
So you didn't have to use relatives necessarily?
We still have that happening, but at this point that would be just a secondary backup because we already have what we need to positively identify them.
Sheriff, I know that you had found these victims on the 19th. Any, I guess, investigation on how long they could have been there?
Well, and the coroner may be able to answer that better than me. A significant number of days, right? And that's the hard part of this case, because it made her job harder, certainly made our job harder. You can't imagine what a scene like that is like, and with warm weather on top of it. And so it's been a very difficult case. It's been difficult on the detectives, the patrol officers, the coroner staff, the crime lab personnel, but this is what they do every day, right? Hats off to them for what they do. But it's there was a considerable number of days, and then when you look at that and you talk about the car, well, that's another 3 weeks. you know, boy, as a law enforcement guy, we want that information in the first 24 hours, right? That first 40 hours is very important to us. And this has been one of those cases where far more difficult, but again, I stand with our cases very, very strong and been reviewed by the prosecutor, and that's why those charges are being filed today. So hopefully we can find Mr. Bullinger and bring this thing to a close.
When was the car found? I can't remember.
We'll have to get that to you.
Was that is the delay in finding the bodies the reason that the cause of death right now you can't say definitively? Is it possible, unlikely though it may be, that they were dead before the bullets were fired? Is that why you're not saying a specific cause of death?
Well, we know what the cause of death is. We have toxicologies back. The delay is that there are different variables involved in decomposing bodies, and you have to take all those factors into account and then try to work your way backwards. At this point, we'll be able to maybe narrow a window down based upon what evidence and where they find, but we'll never come right down exact to it. We may get a day or within a few hours maybe, but we'll never get right on because of the different variances that we have to overcome.
So you're going to wait until you have basically all the information in before you finalize your...
We are allowed to estimate on a death certificate time and date of death, which can always be amended, but we'd like to have that information the first time, so we're just kind of holding on that.
And I think we'll probably end here because there's really not a lot more questions we can answer. But the fact is, there's a reason that we can't answer all your questions, and that is, in any case like this or any other, we are going to protect the integrity of that case. Our ultimate goal is to bring accountability for the person or persons that were involved. We believe there is one person involved here. And so protecting the integrity and confidentiality of that case helps our office help Mr. Topmiller's office to bring that person through adjudication. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you coming out here on short notice. Thank you. You bet.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.